The alien Empress lost her throne, but found greater strength in a human Empress. Thalira's eyes scanned the glittering city of Xyrithia from the highest tower of her palace. The sky was a swirl of violet and gold, streaked with clouds that seemed almost alive, reflecting the power and grandeur of her empire. From here, she could see the spires of the central district stretching like crystal pillars into the sky, the energy streams flowing between them shimmering with a pulse like the heartbeat of the planet itself. She had ruled this world for decades, guiding it with intelligence, precision, and unshakable will. Yet, as she looked down, a small unease stirred deep within her, a whisper she tried to ignore. The council chambers had been unusually quiet that morning. Her advisors, normally quick with reports and proposals, had seemed distracted, their eyes flicking toward corners of the room as if they feared something she could not see. Thalira dismissed the feeling as paranoia. She had faced threats before, rebellions in the outer territories, alien invaders trying to steal secrets of her technology, but nothing had shaken her like this subtle tension. She was preparing to leave for a diplomatic visit to the neighboring system of Crindes when the first warning arrived. A sharp, urgent pulse of energy hit the palace's main defenses. It was small, almost insignificant, barely enough to rattle the fine crystal structures, yet the palace sensors flagged it as a breach. Thalira's heart quickened. She turned from the window, her long robes whispering against the polished floor as she moved to the communication console. "Report," she said, her voice steady but firm. "The outer sector gates are compromised," said a junior officer, his voice trembling. "Multiple ships, unknown origin, they bypassed all scanning protocols." Thalira's mind raced. This was not a random attack. It was precise, coordinated, and terrifyingly clever. She called her generals, but before any orders could be fully executed, the palace itself shook with the force of a focused strike. Alarms blared across every level. The Empress's advisors scrambled, some fleeing toward the secure chambers, others trying to access defense protocols. Thalira took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. She was not one to panic. Her species prized control, intellect, and foresight above all else. She had faced wars, famines, and uprisings, yet nothing had ever truly threatened her existence, until now. As the outer walls of the palace shimmered with energy shields, she realized the attackers were not just ordinary rebels. They had knowledge of the palace's most secret defenses, down to the energy calibration of her shields. She moved quickly, her mind calculating every possible escape route. Her closest advisors, once loyal, had been compromised or silenced. There was no time to reason with anyone inside. Thalira activated a hidden portal in the depths of the palace, one reserved for emergencies no one else was supposed to know existed. The air shimmered, and with a final glance at the throne room, she stepped through. When she emerged, she was no longer in the familiar marble and crystal halls of Xyrithia. The portal spat her out into the wildlands beyond the city, a stretch of jagged rocks and forests she had only heard about in old legends. The air here was dense, scented with alien flora and alive with the sounds of unseen creatures. The sky had shifted to a darker shade of violet, and two suns glared weakly over the horizon, casting long shadows across the terrain. Thalira felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She was free from the immediate danger but completely exposed to the unknown. Her first steps were cautious. The terrain was treacherous, full of unstable rocks and sudden drops. Every sound, every movement in the shadows seemed to hint at danger. Her species had always ruled through intellect and technology, rarely engaging with the natural hazards of the planet directly. Yet now, she had no choice. Survival demanded adaptation, speed, and alertness. Hours passed, and the initial adrenaline began to fade. Thalira felt exhaustion creeping into her limbs, a sensation she rarely acknowledged in the controlled environment of the palace. Hunger gnawed at her, though she ignored it, focusing instead on the immediate necessity, finding shelter. The forest ahead seemed dense but manageable, its trees tall and twisted, their leaves glowing faintly with bioluminescence. She hoped to find a safe place among them to rest, at least until she could plan her next move. It was then she saw them, humans. They moved cautiously, wearing suits of reflective material that blended with the surroundings. Thalira had studied humans from afar but had never encountered one personally. They were shorter than her species, their limbs less rigid, yet there was a fluidity in their movements she found, surprising. They were scanning the forest, speaking in soft tones that carried easily despite the distance. Their technology was primitive compared to hers, yet practical, effective, and mobile in ways her empire's machines were not. At first, she considered avoiding them entirely. Humans were unpredictable, and she could not afford to trust anyone now. But as she watched, she realized they were not hostile. In fact, they were observing the terrain with the same care she herself had adopted. Hunger, exhaustion, and necessity pushed her closer until she stepped into a clearing where they were preparing to set up a small camp. They froze when they saw her. She could see the shock in their eyes, the sudden tension in their posture. Thalira raised her hands, palms outward, a universal gesture of peace she hoped they would recognize. One of them, a man with short, dark hair and eyes that seemed unusually perceptive, stepped forward. Who are you?" he asked, his voice cautious but not unkind. "I am Thalira," she said, her voice calm and commanding. "Empress of Zyrithia, I mean you no harm." The humans exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Zyrithia," the man repeated. "You mean the Empress from the archives? The one the records say ruled 100 systems?" Thalira inclined her head. She did not need to speak further. Her presence, her posture, and the faint glow of her energy shield, still active beneath her robes, conveyed what words could not. The humans were cautious but intrigued. They offered her water, which she accepted silently, knowing that survival demanded cooperation. As night fell, the forest came alive with strange sounds and luminous insects. Thalira sat near their small fire, observing the humans as they worked to secure their camp. She noted their methods, simple, practical, yet effective. They were resourceful, not relying on immense technology but on clever tools and teamwork. It was different from anything she had known, and it stirred something within her, a grudging admiration, perhaps even respect. During the night she slept lightly, her mind never fully at rest. Dreams of the palace and the betrayal haunted her, shadowed by the fear of what might come next. The humans, despite their appearance, seemed to sense her unease. They spoke quietly among themselves, as if debating the best way to help a being far beyond their understanding, yet still within their ability to assist. By morning, Thalira had made a decision. Survival required more than hiding. It required alliance, however uncomfortable. She approached the human leader, Captain Alex Mercer, whose calm demeanor and sharp mind had already impressed her. "I will travel with you," she said. "I cannot remain here alone, and I see that your knowledge of this land surpasses my own." Mercer hesitated, studying her closely. "You trust us?" he asked. Thalira's eyes met his. "Trust is not yet given, it is a choice, but for now we share the same goal, survival." And so an unlikely partnership was formed. The next days were a trial. They crossed dense forests filled with unseen predators, climbed rocky cliffs that seemed impossible, and navigated rivers that roared with alien energy. Thalira's skills as an empress, her tactical mind, her physical training, her understanding of advanced technology proved valuable, but she learned quickly that the humans had their own kind of power. They could improvise in ways she had never considered, turning the smallest advantage into a life-saving solution. During one particularly perilous passage, they encountered a ravine filled with glowing, corrosive liquid. Thalira's first instinct was to use a levitation field to fly over it, but the humans quickly fashioned a bridge from fallen trees and vines, calculating weight distribution with precision and speed. Watching them, Thalira realized that while her species relied on control and planning, these humans thrived in unpredictability, using courage and ingenuity to survive. That night, as they camped once more, Thalira reflected on what she had learned. The betrayal that had cost her the throne had also forced her into a situation she could not have imagined. Here, stripped of power, surrounded by beings she had once considered primitive, she discovered qualities that rivaled her own. She felt a stirring of hope, fragile yet undeniable. Perhaps her path forward was not simply to reclaim a throne, but to grow stronger in ways she had never imagined. As the fire crackled and the humans slept, Thalira stared at the twin suns that had set in the horizon, their fading light painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. The galaxy was vast, and danger lurked everywhere, but for the first time since the coup, she felt a strange sense of clarity. Survival was not just about fleeing or fighting, it was about learning, adapting, and forming bonds where none seemed possible. And in this realization, the Empress understood that her journey had only just begun. The forest grew darker as the twin suns sank lower in the sky, painting the trees with long shadows that seemed almost alive. Empress Thalira walked carefully beside the humans, her sharp eyes scanning every movement, every flicker of light, as if the trees themselves might hide enemies. The humans moved differently from her species, lighter, quicker, yet cautious in a way that mirrored her own instincts. They had survived here before, she realized, and their knowledge was already saving her life. Captain Alex Mercer led the way. He spoke little, but every word he did say carried clarity and purpose. "We need to reach the river by nightfall," he said, pointing ahead where the forest opened slightly. "The current is strong, but it's our best path out of this sector before the predators wake." Thalira nodded, silently approving. She had learned to trust his judgment, at least for now. Her pride bristled at the thought of relying on humans, yet she could not deny their effectiveness. They moved with confidence, improvising when the terrain became difficult, using simple tools in ways she would have never considered. As they approached a dense thicket, a strange sound reached Thalira's ears, a low, vibrating hum that seemed to come from the ground itself. She froze, instincts sharpening. Mercer noticed her pause and signaled for silence. The humans crouched, scanning the area with small handheld devices that glowed faintly in the dim light. "Energy signatures," Mercer whispered. "Predators, they sense vibrations and movement." Thalira's mind raced. Her species relied on technology to overpower threats, but here, raw skill and observation mattered more than raw power. She followed the human's lead, stepping lightly on moss-covered stones, her movements precise, almost like a predator herself. The creatures emerged gradually, massive beings with scales that reflected the faint light, their eyes glowing like coals. They hissed, testing the intruders. One of the humans, a woman with keen eyes and steady hands, reached for a small device strapped to her belt. She pressed a button, and a high-frequency sound emitted, causing the creatures to hesitate. Thalira watched closely, noting the balance of simplicity and ingenuity. The humans did not fight these beasts with weapons of destruction. They used understanding and creativity to navigate danger. Once they were past the threat, Thalira exhaled, feeling her pulse slow. "You humans are remarkable," she said, her voice low but tinged with admiration. Mercer glanced at her, a faint smile on his face. "Remarkable or lucky?" he asked. "There's a difference." Thalira considered this. Perhaps it was both. Luck could be guided by skill, and skill could be sharpened by experience. In this moment, she realized that the human's way of thinking, flexible, adaptive, and practical, was a type of strength she had rarely encountered. As night fully descended, they reached the river. Its waters glowed faintly under the starlight, reflecting colors she could not name. The current was stronger than it appeared, and the rocks beneath were slippery and sharp. Thalira approached cautiously, calculating each step, while the humans seemed to move almost instinctively. Mercer looked back at her. "Follow my lead, step where I step, and move slowly." Thalira did as instructed, feeling the cool water rise around her legs. The humans worked together, using ropes and makeshift bridges to secure their path. She marveled at their ability to adapt, to find solutions without complex machines or elaborate planning. They did not rely on force alone, but on observation, creativity, and trust. By the time they reached the opposite bank, exhaustion had set in. Thalira's legs ached, her body unfamiliar with this kind of relentless physical effort. Yet there was also exhilaration, a reminder that she was alive, that she could endure challenges she had never faced within the walls of her palace. The humans noticed her fatigue but did not treat her as weak. Instead, they offered encouragement, simple words and gestures that boosted her morale in ways her advisors never had. The humans set up a small camp on the riverbank. They worked quickly and efficiently, gathering firewood, setting up protective barriers, and preparing food. Thalira observed silently, absorbing every technique. She was learning not only about survival but about leadership. Commanding an empire required intellect, strategy, and sometimes fear. But here, with humans, she saw a different type of influence, guidance through respect, collaboration, and shared purpose. During the night, the forest seemed alive with whispers and rustles. Thalira remained awake for hours, her mind never fully at rest. She thought of the palace, of the betrayal that had forced her into this unfamiliar land. The advisors who had betrayed her had assumed her empire was safe without her, but they had underestimated her resilience. She had survived not by cunning alone, but by accepting help she would once have refused. Mercer sat nearby, sharpening a simple blade with calm precision. Thalira watched him for a moment before speaking. "Your people, you survive through simplicity. You adapt in ways my species rarely does. How do you do it?" Mercer looked up, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "We learn from each situation. We make the best choice we can with what we have. We don't wait for perfection or absolute control. Sometimes that's enough to survive." Thalira considered this. Control, perfection, dominance. Her species had always prized these qualities. Yet here was a human, facing the same dangers she faced, but moving with confidence that came not from power, but from observation, intuition, and courage. She realized that perhaps her own approach had been limited, focused too narrowly on authority and expectation rather than adaptability and trust. Days passed, and their journey continued. They traversed plains of crystal-like vegetation that reflected the sunlight in dazzling arrays, crossed canyons where the winds howled like living beings, and scaled cliffs that seemed impossible to climb. Each challenge tested Thalira's endurance and intellect, but also revealed the human's ingenuity. They could fashion tools from scraps, build shelters from natural materials, and navigate the terrain with an uncanny sense of direction. One evening, as they camped on a rocky plateau overlooking a valley filled with glowing flora, Thalira finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. She spoke quietly, almost to herself, but Mercer overheard. "I have ruled an empire, commanded fleets, and faced wars I thought were impossible to survive. And yet, here in this forest, I am learning more about strength than I ever did in the palace." Mercer nodded, understanding. "Strength comes in many forms. You've survived because you didn't rely on what you thought made you powerful. You adapted, you observed, you trusted others when it mattered." Thalira felt a rare warmth in her chest. Pride was still there, but it was tempered with understanding. Perhaps she had been too rigid, too focused on what it meant to be an empress. Leadership was not only about control. It was about learning from others, about seeing value where she had once dismissed it. Their path took them closer to the outskirts of Zyrithia's controlled territories. Here, the forests were wilder, the land less familiar, and the dangers greater. Thalira felt the weight of responsibility not just for herself, but for the humans who had chosen to accompany her. She could not fail, not now, when they had both invested trust and effort in this fragile alliance. It was during one such trek through a valley of towering crystal trees that they encountered their first hostile patrol. Soldiers loyal to the usurpers had been searching for her, using sensors and scanners that pulsed faintly in the darkness. Thalira froze, her mind racing. She could have confronted them directly, using her energy shields and combat training, but Mercer raised a hand. "Wait," he whispered. "Let them pass. Watch and learn. Sometimes the best move is to stay unseen." Thalira obeyed, her pride stung, but her intellect recognizing the wisdom. They crouched behind the crystalline trunks, silent and still, as the patrol passed mere meters from their hiding spot. She realized then that the human strength was not in their physical power or technology. It was in patience, observation, and strategy. When the danger had passed, Thalira exhaled, the tension leaving her body slowly. "You have taught me something valuable today," she admitted quietly. "That power is not always in confrontation, but in knowledge, timing, and restraint." Mercer smiled faintly. "And you've taught me something as well. That strength can come from determination and experience, from seeing challenges not as obstacles but as lessons." As the nights continued, their bond grew. They shared stories of their worlds. Thalira spoke of her empire, its wonders and its betrayals, while the humans spoke of Earth, of its simple beauty, its resilience, and its endless curiosity. Thalira listened, fascinated by their perspective, noting how their creativity and emotional intelligence complemented the harsh logic of her own species. By the time they reached a plateau overlooking the distant capital city, a new understanding had formed. Thalira realized that reclaiming her throne would require more than brute force or advanced technology. She would need insight, adaptability, and perhaps most importantly, allies who thought differently from her. Humans offered that, in ways her own species could not. For the first time since the betrayal, hope stirred within her. She was no longer simply a fugitive. She was a leader learning new skills, forging unexpected alliances, and discovering strength she had never considered. The forest, the humans, and the challenges they faced together were shaping her into a new kind of empress, one not bound by tradition, but strengthened by experience, trust, and resilience. And as the twin suns rose once more, casting light on the valley below, Thalira knew that the journey ahead would be dangerous, uncertain, and full of surprises. But she also knew she would not face it alone. Humans, unpredictable yet remarkably capable, had become her companions, her allies, and perhaps the key to a strength greater than any she had ever known. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time she felt ready to meet it. The journey grew harder with each passing day. The forest gave way to rougher terrain, rocky plains, and jagged hills that tested every step. Empress Thalira moved with a grace born of years of discipline, yet she felt fatigue creeping into her muscles. She had survived betrayal, fled the palace, and navigated the wildlands with the help of humans, but now a new challenge loomed. There was something in the air, a tension she could not ignore. The ground seemed to vibrate faintly beneath her feet, and distant echoes carried strange patterns of sound, like warnings. Captain Alex Mercer walked beside her, scanning the horizon. "We're approaching the outer expanse," he said. "It's a dangerous region. Not many travel there willingly. It's mostly uncharted, and the forces searching for you are active nearby." Thalira nodded. She had expected danger, but she had underestimated the scope. The humans had been careful, but the enemy was clever. Someone had planned her downfall with precision, using spies and technology that rivaled even the most advanced of her empire's devices. This was not a simple rebellion. This was a coordinated effort, a conspiracy designed to weaken her and seize power quickly. The humans moved with efficiency. They carried small packs, tools, and devices that emitted faint light, yet none of it seemed bulky or cumbersome. Thalira had relied on advanced technology for everything in her life: ships, shields, communication networks. But these humans had learned to survive with limited resources, using clever improvisation instead of brute force. She realized that this adaptability was a kind of strength she had never valued before. As night fell, they set up a small camp on a rocky plateau overlooking a valley shrouded in mist. Thalira sat quietly, observing the humans as they worked. One of them, a young woman with a sharp gaze, carefully checked their makeshift perimeter, while Mercer consulted a small holographic map. "We need to move fast," Mercer said. "The patrols are increasing in number and we're close to a mining colony. It's abandoned now, but it could hide supplies or enemies. Either way, it's a good spot to plan our next move." Thalira studied the map. Her mind raced, calculating the terrain, the possible threats, and the safest paths forward. She had ruled empires, commanded fleets, and faced wars before, yet this situation demanded something different. Here, strategy alone would not be enough. Observation, intuition, and trust in her companions were just as vital. The humans were not only resourceful, they were brave. They moved into the valley at first light, careful and silent. Thalira followed, her senses heightened, aware that at any moment they could be discovered. The terrain was treacherous: slippery rocks, sudden drop-offs, and patches of weak ground, but the humans navigated it effortlessly. Thalira realized that courage and calm decision-making were as important as strength or skill. As they descended into the valley, the first signs of danger appeared. A series of energy sensors glowed faintly among the rocks, the faint hum of surveillance detectable only to someone with acute senses. Thalira froze, recognizing the technology immediately. The usurpers had deployed these devices to track movement, to locate her wherever she went. Mercer noticed her pause. "They're tracking us," he said quietly. "We need to disable them without being seen." Thalira's mind raced. Her instinct was to attack directly, to destroy the sensors with her energy shields, but Mercer shook his head. "No," he whispered. "Stealth first, force later if necessary." Following his lead, they moved carefully. Mercer and the young woman worked together, using small devices to jam the sensors. Thalira observed, amazed at their precision. They relied on understanding and technique, not brute force. The sensors flickered and went dark one by one, and they slipped past undetected. Once they were safe, Thalira allowed herself a moment of admiration. "Your methods, they are effective," she said quietly. "I underestimated them." Mercer smiled faintly. "Sometimes effectiveness is more valuable than power." As they continued, they came across a small abandoned settlement. The structures were worn, the roofs collapsing, but supplies remained: food, water purification devices, and energy cells that could power communications. Thalira studied the humans as they sorted through the materials, noting their organization and cooperation. They worked quickly, efficiently, and without complaint. She realized that their ability to function as a team, even under pressure, was a kind of leadership she had rarely seen before. That night, as they camped within the ruins, Thalira spoke quietly to Mercer. "I have faced armies, spies, and conspiracies before, but I have never encountered planning like this. Whoever orchestrated my overthrow, they are not ordinary rebels." Mercer nodded. "We've noticed patterns. The attacks are too precise, the timing too perfect. This is bigger than a simple coup. Someone wants more than your throne, they want control over more than one system." Thalira's heart sank. Her initial goal had been survival, then reclaiming her throne, but now the stakes were higher. The conspiracy extended far beyond her palace, threatening stability across the galaxy. She realized that she could not act alone. Even with her knowledge and power, she would need allies, insight, and perhaps the ingenuity of the humans who had become her companions. The following days were a series of tests. They encountered hostile wildlife that hunted in packs, unpredictable terrain that demanded careful planning, and occasional patrols of enemy scouts. Each challenge taught Thalira something new, not only about the humans, but about herself. She discovered patience she had never exercised, humility she had rarely felt, and courage that was not driven by fear of loss, but by responsibility to those who depended on her. One morning, they reached the edge of a canyon where a river of molten crystal flowed. The heat was intense, and the bridge of natural rock spanning the canyon was narrow and unstable. Thalira measured each step, her mind calculating weight, balance, and the strength of the stone beneath her. Mercer and the others moved ahead, marking safe spots and guiding her carefully. Halfway across, a tremor shook the bridge. Rocks shifted underfoot, and the molten river surged below. Thalira's energy shield flared instinctively, protecting her, but she realized that force alone could not save them. She relied on the humans' guidance, adjusting her steps to their cues, trusting their judgment in a way she had never trusted anyone before. They reached the other side safely, breathing heavily but relieved. Thalira looked at the humans, understanding fully now what she had only glimpsed before. Their strength was not in technology or combat alone, but in adaptability, trust, and teamwork. She felt a renewed determination to not only survive, but to learn from them and use this knowledge to confront the forces threatening her empire. As they set up camp that night, Thalira received a sudden warning signal from her own sensors, an encrypted message that had somehow reached her despite the forest's interference. It was a fragment of intelligence, revealing that the coup had been orchestrated by a coalition of factions, each seeking power over multiple star systems. The message hinted at an imminent attack, one that could destroy entire colonies if left unchecked. Thalira's mind raced. This was worse than she had imagined. The humans were strong, clever, and resourceful, but the threat they faced was massive. She realized that reclaiming her throne would not be enough. She needed to understand the coalition's strategy and act before the next strike. She shared the message with Mercer. "This is not just about me," she said. "If these factions succeed, entire systems could fall. We must act." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Then we need a plan, and fast. We can't fight them directly. They outnumber us. But we can disrupt their communications, sabotage their resources, and gather intelligence to turn the tide." Thalira considered this carefully. Her instincts told her to strike immediately, to use her power to crush the opposition, but Mercer's strategy made sense. Patience, stealth, and calculated action would preserve their strength and maximize their impact. She realized that the humans' approach complemented her own abilities, creating a combination that could challenge even the most sophisticated enemies. The following days were filled with reconnaissance missions. Thalira and the humans moved through abandoned settlements, hidden valleys, and natural caves, observing enemy movements, recording energy signatures, and identifying weaknesses in the coalition's plans. Each discovery strengthened her understanding of their strategy and deepened her respect for the humans' abilities. During one mission, they discovered an enemy outpost hidden within the mountains. The outpost was small but heavily guarded, with advanced energy shields and automated defenses. Thalira studied it carefully. She could have destroyed it in a direct assault, but Mercer's plan was different. Using a combination of stealth, environmental awareness, and simple tools, they disabled the outpost's sensors and retrieved critical intelligence without being detected. Thalira was impressed. "I would have underestimated this," she admitted. "Direct force is easy, subtlety is difficult but more powerful in the long run." Mercer nodded. "Sometimes the most effective way to fight is to avoid confrontation until you're ready to win." As they returned to their camp that night, Thalira felt a sense of purpose she had not felt since her throne was taken. She was no longer just a fugitive or a victim. She was a leader learning new strategies, forging alliances, and preparing to confront a threat far greater than she had ever imagined. The humans had become her teachers, her partners, and her allies in ways she could never have predicted. And as she looked at the stars that night, Thalira understood one truth clearly. Reclaiming her throne was important, but the survival and stability of the galaxy required more than power alone. It required intelligence, adaptability, and the courage to trust and learn from others, even those once considered beneath her notice. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope. The path ahead would be dangerous and uncertain, but with humans by her side, she felt ready to face the challenges and uncover the full extent of the conspiracy threatening her world. The days grew longer and the nights colder as Empress Thalira and the humans pressed deeper into the outer expanse. The terrain was unforgiving, stretching from jagged cliffs to deep valleys filled with thick, glowing mist that clung to their skin and clothes. Every step was a challenge, every breath a reminder of how far she had come from the comfort of her palace. Yet with each passing day, she felt stronger, not just physically, but in her understanding of leadership, trust, and the unusual bond she shared with these humans. Captain Alex Mercer led the group with a calm determination that inspired confidence. Thalira walked beside him, her sharp mind constantly calculating, analyzing, and learning. She had realized that brute force alone would never reclaim her throne or defeat the coalition. Success would require strategy, subtlety, and the ability to think like those who sought to destroy her. She had learned to observe, to listen, and to trust, skills that her species valued but rarely practiced with the humility she now felt. As they navigated a narrow canyon, a sudden shift in the ground caught their attention. Rocks tumbled from above, dislodged by an unseen force, and a low growl echoed from the shadows. Thalira's energy shield flared instinctively, protecting them as the humans readied their small devices, ready to respond with intelligence rather than brute force. The threat emerged slowly, massive armored creatures that seemed almost mechanical in nature, their eyes glowing with red intensity. Mercer whispered, "We can't fight them head-on. Follow my lead and keep calm." Thalira nodded, trusting his judgment. The humans moved with a coordination that left her in awe, weaving between rocks, using the environment to their advantage, and employing small gadgets to distract and disable the creatures. Thalira realized that courage alone was not enough. Wisdom, observation, and quick adaptation could achieve far more than raw strength. She followed their lead, combining her own abilities with their ingenuity to navigate the dangerous terrain safely. Once the threat passed, they continued through the canyon, emerging into a hidden valley. Here, nature had created a natural amphitheater of cliffs and streams, and the humans quickly identified it as a perfect place to set up a temporary base. They worked together, fashioning shelters from the rock formations and gathering resources from the valley. Thalira observed their methods carefully, noting the balance of practicality and creativity. These humans could survive in conditions that would have crippled her species, relying not on technology alone, but on adaptability, intuition, and cooperation. While setting up camp, Thalira received another encrypted message through a small device she had managed to salvage from the palace. The coalition's plans were advancing faster than she had expected. Multiple colonies had already been compromised, and the attack on her capital was only the beginning. The message contained hints of a larger plot, one that threatened to destabilize the entire region. "This is worse than I thought," Thalira said, showing the message to Mercer. "They are not only after my throne, they are targeting entire systems. If we don't act soon, countless lives could be lost." Mercer nodded grimly. Then we need to strike strategically. We can't defeat them directly, they outnumber us. But we can disrupt their communications, sabotage their resources, and gather intelligence to turn the tide. Thalira considered his plan carefully. Her instinct had been to use overwhelming power to destroy the coalition's forces outright. But she realized that Mercer's approach, patience, precision, and collaboration, was wiser. She would need to integrate her own abilities with the humans' ingenuity to have a chance at success. The next days were filled with reconnaissance missions. They moved stealthily through the valley, mapping the coalition's movements and identifying weaknesses in their operations. Thalira learned to observe not just what was visible, but what was implied, the patterns in their patrols, the timing of their communications, and the habits of their soldiers. Each discovery deepened her respect for the human skills and reinforced her understanding that intelligence and adaptability could surpass sheer force. During one mission, they discovered an outpost hidden within a cluster of cliffs. The outpost was small but fortified, equipped with energy shields and automated defenses. Thalira could have destroyed it with her own power, but Mercer urged caution. Using a combination of stealth, strategy, and clever improvisation, they disabled the outpost's sensors and retrieved valuable intelligence without alerting the enemy. Thalira was impressed. "I would have underestimated this," she admitted quietly. "The subtle approach, it is far more powerful than I realized." Mercer nodded. "Sometimes the most effective way to fight is to avoid confrontation until you're ready to win." With the intelligence they gathered, Thalira began to form a plan. The coalition was organized but rigid. Their strategies relied heavily on technology and control, but they underestimated adaptability, creativity, and teamwork. Thalira realized that by combining her knowledge of the coalition's methods with the humans' unconventional thinking, she could exploit their weaknesses. The key was to act not as a single ruler with power, but as a leader who leveraged the strengths of her allies. As they prepared to move toward a critical supply depot, Thalira reflected on how much she had changed since fleeing the palace. She was no longer just an empress driven by pride and authority. She was a leader learning humility, courage, and collaboration. The humans had taught her that strength came in many forms, and she had begun to see the value of intelligence, adaptability, and trust. The night before their mission, Thalira and Mercer sat near the campfire, reviewing the intelligence they had gathered. "We strike at dawn," Mercer said. "We disable their supply lines, cut off communications, and force them to react. We won't win by brute force, but by being smarter, faster, and unpredictable." Thalira nodded. "I have learned much from you all. Your courage, resourcefulness, and insight, they are remarkable. Together we can achieve what alone we could not." The following morning they set out. The valley was quiet, the air tense with anticipation. They moved with precision, avoiding patrols and navigating treacherous terrain. Thalira used her energy shields to protect the group from environmental hazards, while the humans employed their devices and knowledge to neutralize enemy sensors and traps. It was a delicate balance of power and ingenuity, and they executed it flawlessly. At the supply depot, they faced their first real opposition. Guards patrolled the area and energy turrets scanned for intruders. Thalira considered attacking directly, but Mercer signaled her to hold. Using careful observation and coordination, the humans disabled the turrets and created distractions that allowed them to infiltrate the depot without detection. Thalira moved with silent precision, taking down guards only when necessary and always ensuring the humans were safe. Once inside, they found the supplies and communications equipment critical to the coalition's plans. They set charges to disable key systems, ensuring that the enemy would be forced to respond to their actions. The humans worked efficiently, guiding Thalira in the use of unconventional methods that she had never considered. Together, they left the depot in ruins, slipping away before the coalition realized what had happened. As they retreated to a safe distance, Thalira felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known in her palace. The humans had not only survived alongside her, they had taught her new ways of thinking, new ways of leading, and new ways of achieving victory. She realized that this alliance was more than temporary. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. That night, as they camped beneath the stars, Thalira reflected on their progress. The coalition was powerful but not infallible. They relied on control and technology, while she and the humans relied on adaptability, intelligence, and courage. It was an unusual combination, but one that gave her hope. The journey to reclaim her throne was far from over, but she now understood that success would come not from power alone, but from collaboration and strategy. Thalira's thoughts turned to the humans themselves. They were remarkable beings, resilient, inventive, and capable of great courage. She had come to respect them, not as subjects or inferiors, but as equals, partners in a struggle that transcended species and personal ambition. She realized that this lesson was the most important one she could have learned. Leadership was not about domination. It was about understanding, trust, and the ability to inspire others to act together toward a common goal. As the fire burned low and the valley slept in quiet anticipation, Thalira felt a renewed determination. She would reclaim her throne, protect her people, and confront the coalition, not as an isolated ruler, but as a leader strengthened by the humans' insight and courage. Together, they would challenge the forces that sought to destroy her world and uncover the full scope of the conspiracy threatening the galaxy. The path ahead was dangerous, uncertain, and full of challenges, but Thalira felt ready. She was no longer just an empress. She was a leader transformed by experience, shaped by adversity, and strengthened by the humans who had become her allies. And with that strength, she would face the coming battles not alone, but with companions she trusted, admired, and had come to rely upon completely. The day of confrontation arrived with a sky that seemed unusually still, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. Empress Thalira stood on a rocky outcrop overlooking the coalition's main command center. From here, she could see the sprawling complex, energy shields shimmering faintly under the twin suns, and patrols moving with precise rhythm. It was a fortress of power and control, but Thalira's mind was calm. She had learned patience, strategy, and the strength of allies, and now it was time to put that knowledge into action. Captain Alex Mercer and the humans were beside her, ready and alert. Their preparations were meticulous. They had studied the coalition's patrol routes, communication signals, and weak points. Every detail had been noted, every possible obstacle considered. Thalira felt a surge of admiration and trust. These humans had transformed from simple companions into strategic partners. She realized that she would never have been ready to face this threat alone. Thalira surveyed the valley below. The coalition's forces were numerous and heavily armed, but their reliance on rigid systems and technology made them predictable. Thalira's plan was simple in concept but required perfect execution. Disrupt their communications, disable critical defenses, and strike in a coordinated attack that combined her abilities with the humans' ingenuity. The first step began at dawn. Mercer led a small team to disable the outer communication nodes. Using devices that emitted low-frequency pulses, they bypassed the security measures and disrupted the signals. Guards moved in confusion, trying to locate the source, but the humans had already retreated to safety. Thalira watched silently, noting how precision and cleverness could achieve what brute force alone could not. Next, she moved with the remaining team to a position overlooking the supply depot. Thalira's energy shields allowed them to approach undetected, and the humans guided her with subtle hand signals and advice. When they reached the depot, she unleashed a controlled burst of energy, targeting only the critical systems. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the coalition forces scrambled in panic. The humans moved quickly to sabotage additional equipment, cutting off reinforcements and creating confusion within the enemy ranks. The coalition commander, a tall figure in dark armor, appeared on a central platform, his expression one of disbelief and anger. Thalira's heart raced, but she remained steady. She had faced betrayals and battles before, but this was different. This time, she was not alone. She had allies who thought creatively, acted courageously, and shared her vision of victory. The humans signaled, and Thalira advanced. The energy shields around her glowed brightly, but she realized that her greatest weapon was not her power. It was the combination of her strength with the humans' ingenuity. She struck at critical control points, carefully disabling energy barriers and defensive systems while avoiding unnecessary destruction. The coalition forces were caught off guard, their rigid plans unraveling under the unpredictable assault. Mercer and his team worked in perfect coordination, using the chaos to sabotage weapons caches and misdirect patrols. Thalira observed, learning from their quick thinking and resourcefulness. She realized that leadership was no longer about issuing commands and expecting obedience. It was about guiding, collaborating, and empowering those around her to act with intelligence and initiative. As the battle intensified, Thalira confronted the coalition commander directly. He attempted to overwhelm her with advanced weaponry and calculated attacks, but Thalira's experience, combined with the human's strategic positioning, allowed her to counter each move. She struck with precision, disabling his systems without unnecessary destruction, demonstrating the restraint and judgment she had learned during her journey. The humans proved invaluable in every moment. They created diversions, dismantled traps, and rescued those caught in danger. Thalira observed their courage and ingenuity, realizing that their strength was not in sheer power, but in adaptability, intelligence, and teamwork. Each time she saw them succeed against impossible odds, she felt a growing sense of unity and shared purpose. Together, they were stronger than any single force in the galaxy. The turning point came when Thalira accessed the Coalition's central command system. Using a combination of her advanced skills and the humans' unconventional techniques, she seized control of key communications and defense networks. The Coalition forces, now disoriented and cut off from their command structure, faltered. Thalira felt a surge of clarity and determination. Victory was within reach, not because of her power alone, but because of the partnership she had forged with the humans. As the Coalition commander attempted a desperate final attack, Mercer and the human team intervened, using calculated maneuvers to neutralize the threat. Thalira moved swiftly, disabling his weapons and forcing him to surrender. The battle was over. The Coalition's plans had been dismantled, their forces scattered, and the threat to the galaxy contained. Thalira had reclaimed not just her throne, but a deeper understanding of leadership, strength, and unity. The aftermath was quiet but profound. Thalira addressed her people, not as a ruler issuing commands, but as a leader sharing her experience and vision. She spoke of the humans, their courage, insight, and collaboration, acknowledging how much she had learned from them. Her people listened in awe, seeing the transformation in their Empress. She had grown, not only in power, but in wisdom and compassion. Mercer and the humans were celebrated not as outsiders, but as heroes. They had proven that courage, intelligence, and adaptability could rival even the most advanced technology. Thalira realized that this alliance had created something new, a partnership that transcended species, based on trust, respect, and shared purpose. In the weeks that followed, Thalira implemented changes in her leadership. She integrated human strategies into her governance, encouraging collaboration, creativity, and adaptive thinking among her advisors and military leaders. She had learned that power alone was insufficient. True strength came from understanding, flexibility, and the ability to inspire others to act with intelligence and courage. The humans prepared to return to their home world, but the bond between them and Thalira remained strong. She had come to respect their perspective, admire their resilience, and trust their judgment. In a final moment of quiet reflection, she acknowledged that her greatest strength had not come from her throne, her technology, or her authority, but from the lessons she had learned from humans, lessons of courage, ingenuity, and unity. As the human ships lifted off from the capital, Thalira watched from the palace balcony. The city shimmered under the twin suns, restored to order but forever changed by the events that had unfolded. She felt a sense of completion and renewal. Her empire was safe, her enemies defeated, and her understanding of leadership transformed. She had discovered that true strength was not solitary. It was shared, cultivated through trust, learning, and cooperation. Thalira turned her gaze to the stars, contemplating the vast galaxy beyond. She knew challenges would come again, new threats, new conspiracies, but she also knew she was no longer the same ruler who had fled her palace. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more adaptable. She had discovered the power of partnership, the strength of human ingenuity, and the value of learning from those she had once underestimated. Her journey had begun with betrayal and loss, but it had ended in discovery, growth, and triumph. Thalira's throne was restored, but her leadership had transformed into something greater than power alone. She ruled with insight, courage, and respect for the potential of others, understanding that the galaxy's future depended not on domination, but on collaboration and shared strength. As the stars twinkled above and the city below flourished, Thalira knew that her greatest achievement was not reclaiming her throne, but discovering a strength she had never known existed, a strength found in humanity, partnership, and the courage to embrace the unexpected. The galaxy had tested her, challenged her, and forced her to grow, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to lead in a new era of understanding and unity. The human's legacy would remain within her empire, a reminder that intelligence, courage, and adaptability could overcome even the most formidable challenges. And in that realization, Thalira felt a profound sense of hope. The galaxy was vast, full of uncertainty and danger, but she was no longer alone. With allies, insight, and a new understanding of strength, she was ready to face the future, undaunted, determined, and transformed. The Empress had lost her throne once, but in doing so, she had gained something far greater: wisdom, resilience, and the realization that true power comes not from fear or dominance, but from trust, courage, and the ability to learn from those around you. And with that knowledge, she stepped forward, prepared to lead not just an empire, but a united galaxy toward a brighter, stronger future.